Sir, the floor is all yours.
All right. So again, Keith, thanks for allowing me a few minutes. When you asked about new beginnings, the first thing I started thinking about was there are, lots of new beginnings in someone's life, right? And I've been fortunate enough to kind of come from Inkster, go to Eastern, go to U of M, do some traveling, do some different kinds of work, worked in politics. And now I'm a social worker who works in a law enforcement agency. So when you started talking about new beginnings, I started thinking about, do I share something on my daughter and having a daughter, or, what do I share about? And the thing that really came to light to me was to talk about the work that I do now. And so I just want to share one story related to the law enforcement, kind of what really brought me into law enforcement. Because again, I think Britta said this a lot of times, folks will ask her around, or, like, do Black folks camp, or how do you do this? Same thing when folks hear that I'm a social worker that now works at a police agency, one of the first questions they ask is, well, how did that happen? So I'll just give you one quick story around, I think for me, how it happened. So at the sheriff's office, I get to do the media. I get to share the stories that when something tragic happens. So when I first started doing that, I'd be on the news. Some of my friends would say, oh, that's cool. We seen you on TV last night. My mom would say that was cool. Well, after a while, the only time I was on television is when something horrible happened. And so I kind of quickly learned that although people thought it was pretty cool to see me on TV, for me, it became a negative. Every time I had to be on TV, I was telling a tragic story. And so this one particular story is the one that I think sits heaviest with me. And it's the one that really prompted me to go from just being an administrator and an appointed official at the sheriff's office, and it had me wanting to become a police officer. So this is the new beginning. So a couple summers ago, I was at work and got a call that there was a 2-year-old kid that had gone missing. And the media was starting to show up at this house. They had been searching for him for a while, and they couldn't find him. Unfortunately, they called 911, and here's how the story goes. So deputy is arriving on the scene. He's starting to get some information from the family, and the family explains that they had a birthday party in the backyard. And there was a lot of younger kids and siblings and cousins who were all there. And the aunt, who was supposed to be watching the kids at the birthday party, takes one of the youngest infants up on the back porch and starts to change the diaper, and momentarily looks away from the kids who are playing in the backyard. After she changes that diaper, she turns back around, starts to take a counting of all the kids who are there, and there's a 2-year-old that she can't find. So she immediately goes in the house, starts to get some of the other adults. They all start to search. Moments go by, longer time goes by. Long story short, they can't find them, so they wind up calling us. Deputy starts to arrive on the scene, and they ask, where was the last place that you saw the kid? And they say, well, in the backyard. Well, what's in the backyard? Swings, a swimming pool. Stop right there. Go check the pool. So they go to check the swimming pool. It's got a pool cover on it. They lift up the cover, jump in the swimming pool, pull the 2-year-old out. The deputies are arriving on scene at this time and start to give mouth-to-mouth to the 2-year-old. They put him in the back of the ambulance. Ambulance takes him to the hospital. In comes me. I show up to the scene because there's media trucks that are starting to show up because there's a 2-year-old that's missing. And by the time I get there, the 2-year-old has died at the hospital. So I didn't know this at the time. I'm an administrator. I'm not a police officer. And when I get there, the lieutenant on scene says to me, hey, Derrick, I know you're new, but I have to do the death notification to the family, and I just need someone else, a second person, to come in with me. That was lesson number 1 for me, which was I never thought about it before, but it's actually police officers who do the death notifications in situations like this. So of course, he's like, you don't have to say anything. I know you're not trained to do this. Just come in with me. So I come into the house with him. We're sitting at the kitchen table. It happens to be the aunt who was the one watching the kids when this tragedy happened. She didn't know at the time, but he started to share with her that the 2-year-old had died. And as he does, this aunt starts to scream, a scream that I'll never forget, a scream of never being able to see her nephew again. And when she does that, I didn't know it, but all the kids who were at the party were actually in the basement. So they hear their mom, their aunt scream, they run upstairs. Now I kick in the social worker mode. Got all these kids there, I ushered them back downstairs. And while I'm downstairs, I'm meeting all the kids. There's a set of teenage twins in the room. So they're introducing me to all the kids. And there's like a 2-year-old who's like on my leg trying to get my attention. So of course I pick him up. I'm holding this 2-year-old and I'm meeting all the kids in the basement. And as they get around, they get to this kid and they says, yeah, that's the sibling of, we'll just call him Joe. Joe is the 2-year-old who just died. Now they don't know what happened, but I do. Lesson number 2 in this story is like, this stuff is heavy. So I'm holding this kid who's a sibling of the kid who just died, and he's so young, he has no idea that his older sibling is dead. Long story short, fast forward a little bit more, we go back upstairs, we start to leave, and the lieutenant who I was with, who's a deputy for, I don't know, 15, 20 years or so, kind of says, man, I need to go home and see my kids. Ding, ding, ding. Lesson number 3, no matter how long you've been doing this work, something like this, particularly something involving kids, take this toll on you. I often ask people, what do you think happened to that deputy who gave mouth to mouth to that 2-year-old for the rest of his shift? He went right back to work, maybe pulling somebody over. That was lesson number 4. So it's a story that I never forget that changed my perspective on what law enforcement really, really is. I didn't know prior to that. I was a director at a sheriff's office and I thought that I knew. I was someone who marched in the streets here in my neighborhood in West Willow about police brutality, who now was running a police agency, but had no real idea or concept what law enforcement really means or what it meant or what it stood for. And so I started talking to deputies, and every single one of them had a story like this. They had a story of a young person or a family and how it really impacted them. And so it was literally that moment, Keith, that I was like, I want to actually be a police officer. So people always ask me again, how did you go from social work to law enforcement? It's a longer story, but it was that one single incident that I went to that literally changed my perspective and set me on a new path, which I would say was a new beginning for me. And I'll just end there.
Wow, Derrick. You know, we said we weren't going to cry tonight. But, you know, when you're a father and when you have children, whether you've ever lost a child or not, hearing a story like that evokes a whole lot of emotion in you. And so, whew, well, man, wow. Let me just say thank you for sharing the story. And then, you know, you highlighted a really heavy component of what you do in the community. But I know you got a lot of other things that you do in the community as well. I really enjoyed being able to sit in on the My Brother's Keeper call last week. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can just share some of the other things you got going in the community, maybe the My Brother's Keeper initiative and a few other things. And because there's a lot of folks from MC in the chat right now or in the video right now. So if you could just share some things going on in the community that they can get involved with in this time of isolation.
Yeah, for sure. And let me just say, I didn't mean to get all heavy and take your show something really deep, but when it came up, I was just thinking like, that's the thing most recently for me to set me on my path. But I'll just say that is a heavy story, but I get to do some cool stuff, man. I really do get to work with a lot of great people in the community. I get to help out a lot of folks. So that's just one component of my job. You know, last weekend we had the Washington My Brother's Keeper online breakfast. We used to do these breakfasts in person, but with the quarantine, we can't do that. And we had the Lieutenant Governor on. We had Isaiah Livers from U of M basketball and Eli Brooks from U of M basketball, and a whole bunch of brothers just got on the call. And it was just a great time to fellowship and get together. We usually learn from one another, and then we do things where we actually build on community. I'll just say the one piece that really jumped out to me at last week's call was we asked this question, one got to go, right? You know, you play on Facebook, like one of these got to go. Which one would you get rid of? And so it was one got to go, the all-time greatest rappers. I'm just telling everybody right now, the lieutenant governor, he kicked Biggie off the list, y'all. I'm telling you, he got rid of Biggie. I couldn't believe it, but yes, he got rid of Biggie. So we get to have fun at work too. So I just wanted to share that one piece. That's a great thing. And thanks for allowing me to talk a little bit about My Brother's Keeper as well, Keith.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing with that. And you know, I remember hearing the lieutenant governor do that and thinking he is not winning any votes right now.
None at all.
As a matter of fact, he's probably losing some votes and being put on a never listen to again list in some people's minds. But interestingly enough, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Eminem was the choice that got booted from the list that was
Eminem
there.
got blasted, man. They
Now, and
got
who were the other? So it was Biggie, Pac, Eminem,
Jay-Z.
Jay-Z.
Those were the four. It was only four.
And of those four, Eminem was the one who
kicked.
got booted.
Yeah.
I think, well, we're not going to talk about that